Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining our online press conference, nuestros parques, nuestras historias, y nuestro Cinco de Mayo. Our parks, our history, our Cinco de Mayo. I'll let this song play out before we get started. As a quick housekeeping note, if you are here representing an outlet of the press, please change your name in the Zoom box using the ellipses button to write press right before your name.
A Dios porque me mandó lo que tanto pedía. Esto es Grupo Frontera. Todo de mí te pertenece, al año soy tuyo, no más 12 meses. Y es que tú me enloqueces, teniendo que a ti está cabrón que me estrese. Puede que yo no sea perfecto, pero por ti lo intento. De esos ojitos de...
All right, everybody. I've seen the participants slow down, so I think we're good to get started. Hello, my name is Olivia Juarez. I am the Public Land Program Director at Green Latinos. I'm going to start with some quick housekeeping notes. So if you're a member of the press, please update your name by writing press before your name in the Zoom box. The chat is open for commentary and self-introduction, so please let everybody know who you are and where you're coming from in the chat. We also are going to have an open Q&A following speaker statements, so please use the Q&A box for dropping your questions for any of our panelists. You can also, I believe, use the raise your hand function or request to come off mute and pose your question live at the end of the session. So again, my name is Olivia Juarez, Public Land Program Director at Green Latinos, calling in from Salt Lake City, Utah. We're here on the eve of Cinco de Mayo for our online press conference, Our Parks, Our History, Our Cinco de Mayo. Nuestras parques, nuestra historia, nuestro Cinco de Mayo. Cinco de Mayo is also the National Day of Awareness for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls. And we're here to draw attention to Interior Secretary Doug Burgum's policies undermining truthful history at our national parks and making public land access more dangerous for kids and for everybody who we're with. Cinco de Mayo is the anniversary of Mexico's victory over the Second French Empire at the Battle of Puebla, La Batalla de Puebla, on May 5th, 1862. This anniversary celebrates a day in history that, despite being outnumbered and despite being under-equipped, the community of Puebla, Mexico, won their fight for their land, for their water, and for their cultures. While Spanish language interpretation in videos and signs at national parks and Latino and Hispanic history on exhibits, signs, and books at national parks are slated to be potentially erased from places such as San Juan National Historic Site in Puerto Rico, Antietam National Battlefield in Maryland, Gulf Islands National Seashore in Mississippi and Florida, San Antonio Missions National Historical Park in Texas, and Salt River Bay National Historic Park and Ecological Preserve on the U.S. Virgin Islands. This Cinco de Mayo is a reminder to all of us that telling our full histories truthfully is worth fighting for, no matter the odds. Congresswoman Adelita Grijalva, representing Arizona's 7th District, was excited to be here, but she's been called away to visit with constituents in Yuma, Arizona. So we'll send around her remarks when she's able to get that to us following this press conference. To get us started, I am proud to introduce Jasri Taylor, policy advocate at Latino Outdoors. On behalf of Latino Outdoors chapters nationwide, Jasri will articulate the importance of Cinco de Mayo in this moment and how outdoor recreationists are affected by issues of outdoor access and attacks on our national parks and public lands. Over to you, Jasri.
Gracias, Olivia. Buenas tardes or buenos dias, depending on where you're at. My name is Jasri Taylor. I go by Jazz. I'm the policy advocate with Latino Outdoors. Latino Outdoors inspires and connects comunidades to the outdoors, centering culture, celebrating family and heritage while uplifting our history and leadership as part of our outdoor experience. We advance equitable access outdoors and reflect true diversity in our outdoor program, powered by 200 volunteers nationwide. Cinco de Mayo is often reduced to celebration, but its roots are resistance and sovereignty. We are reclaiming Cinco de Mayo by not just correcting our history, but we're reconnecting to the land, our identity, and our power. That connection matters more than ever. And for our Latino communities, cultura and our land are deeply connected. Yet we continue to face barriers to access, including our safety, while public lands are facing real threats across the nation. We've seen protections rolled back in places like Bears Ears and Grand Staircase Escalante, including attacks on our cultural connections in the outdoors, including San Juan National Historic Site in Puerto Rico, the Gulf Islands National Seashore, San Antonio Missions, and many others. These places hold true cultural histories and ecological significance. These are not just isolated incidents, they're reflected in a broader pattern of erasure for people of color, for Latinos, and for our American history. We are history, and simply said, connected to each other, we have the power to speak up against these on a national level, including in our backyards. At Latino Outdoors, we are something different. Public land, we are not something just different, but we're connected to our public lands and spaces of belonging. Reclaiming Cinco de Mayo today means protecting our public lands, investing in equitable access, and ensuring our communities are not just included, but also are leading. Because our connection to the outdoors is ancestral and eternal. We want to thank you today, and we are excited to join the conversation about how we can reclaim and take back Cinco de Mayo.
Thank you so much, Jasri. Now we turn to hear from Sherman Neal II, Deputy Campaign Director at the Sierra Club and the leader of Sierra Club's Military Outdoors Campaign and SOS, Safe Outdoor Spaces for Kids. Over to you, Sherman.
Appreciate it, Olivia. Good afternoon. As you just heard, I'm Sherman Neal. I'm the Deputy Director for the Sierra Club's Military Outdoors Campaign. And firstly, I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak with y'all in partnership with the America the Beautiful for All Coalition. And I'm just glad to see that the coalition exists, during these times. Nothing's guaranteed right now, right? And so I won't try to rehash the history of Cinco de Mayo, but as a Marine Corps veteran, Marine Corps officer, it's the symbolism of what happened at Puebla versus Napoleon III against all odds is something that I found unique in the way that it's studied from a historical standpoint, is studying that particular day, that particular battle, as opposed to how we have memory here, right? We don't look at Little Round Top and Gettysburg or like particular places in Antietam where stands were taken. We come up with some myths, and that leads us to where we're in trouble sometimes. And so I appreciate Cinco de Mayo and having the opportunity to learn to help me understand, how you can tell storytelling in a different way. Transitioning a bit to, where we were talking about kids and immigration policy. The first thing that came to mind to me when asked is James Baldwin. I'm a big James Baldwin fan here. One of my favorite books, The Fire Next Time, because this is just the next time. He stated that, for me as a Black man, it was important he stated that to be a Negro in this country and to be relatively conscious is to be in a rage almost all the time. And that's, I think, describes his first 15 months of the administration, correct? And so, if we look at, this state of rage and we think about what we're consistently seeing on the TV and what we still have to do to endure for ourselves, our communities, and then our children, whether they're your own children or a nuclear family of children or just a communal environment, it has tipped us into a state of rage, and we've seen that all over the country. For me, it's super an honor to be able to, speak where Rahalva would have spoke because, I was really introduced to this issue last year during a rally for the Valley at the Coronado National Monument, where we are trying to prevent destructive border wall construction. And I think it was her second day in office after going through her ordeal where she was on the ground there speaking about these issues. And the other thing I witnessed there was a 10-year-old girl, I want to say young woman, because of the bearing that she showed, that was a member of the Navajo Nation. And she started off a speech with saying, like, this is our land. And that stuck with me throughout this time, because it's not just, the land that 10-year-old has to defend. It's her schoolyard. It's her drop-off point at the school. It's traveling on the bus. It's going to camp if you're in Los Angeles this time last year, right? And so we know that, the rage that we feel, that they feel, is due to, the xenophobia and racism that's manufactured this crisis that's led us to choose our lesser selves as a country at this moment. And so, you know, what we also saw leaving that time was the Representative Grijalva being attacked, right? Almost 2 weeks later in the streets of Tucson, we progressively saw what happened at the border transpire into New Orleans, Charlotte, Chicago, Minneapolis, Maine, and permeate, and we also saw it directly impacting kids. When we talk about Chicago, where I'm from, prior to this administration, I had never heard of a school system setting up an operations center to track what way tear gas would be blowing into schools in advance to know if they had to keep schools open. In Portland, they had to shut down a middle school, which was directly adjacent to a detention center, where kids were uprooted in the middle of their school year for nothing that's happened that they've contributed to. And so around those times, we started as a group, looking at, the basics of what does it take to create a safe outdoor space for kids. And you saw a lot of that play out with DHS and the attempt to shut them down this year. And for the things that we settled on as partner organizations was we need to, one, immediately end immigration enforcement actions at school, parks, and outdoor educational spaces, something that was commonplace before. Two, ensure safe passage for all families accessing educational and outdoor programs. Three, protect schools and outdoor spaces as sanctuary environments where children can learn and grow without fear. And four, commit the policies that guarantee children's access to environmental education, regardless of documentation status. So hopefully we'll dive into it a bit more. But again, I'm happy to see that this group exists. I'm happy to see the rage that I individually feel move into a collective and being used to earn wins. I know it's tough right now, but if we remember in July, where we had military grade vehicles staged at a park while people were at summer school, and where we're at now, where I just was able to go to Deb's Park and host an outing, where kids were there, and know that we could only do that because of the people in cities across the country fought back, means a lot. So I won't wax too far poetic, but I really appreciate the time, and look forward to talking to y'all later.
Thank you very much, Sherman. Now we turn to Angelo Villagomez, a senior fellow at the Center for American Progress, where he works at the intersection of democracy, environmental policy, and equity. He is an ocean conservation expert and a leading advocate for strengthening democratic representation of people in the United States territories and ensuring that territorial communities are fully included in national policy conversations. You have the floor, Angelo.
Thank you, Olivia. The Center for American Progress is deeply concerned that the Trump administration's erasure of history told by our public lands is part of a broader agenda to undermine democratic processes and principles, a tactic long used by extremists and authoritarians. Across the country, we are seeing three dangerous actions. First, names of public places are being changed, severing places from the people whose histories they hold. Second, exhibits are being removed or rewritten, narrowing the story America tells about itself. And third, access is being limited through land sell-offs, funding cuts, staffing reductions, and barriers that make it harder for everyday Americans to experience these places at all. This is not accidental. It is a strategy. Despite popular perceptions that the National Park Service is first and foremost the steward of spectacular natural vistas, 2/3 of the system's nearly 400 parks exist explicitly to protect and interpret cultural and historic resources. Public lands are not just for recreation. They are our shared memory. They exist because our laws demand more than scenic landscapes. The laws that establish the National Park Service and the nation's historic preservation efforts charge us to protect these historic places, to preserve sites of national significance, and to safeguard America's historic heritage so it can inspire and educate future generations. Public lands and waters play a crucial role in defining the multicultural ideals and national identity of the United States. But the Trump administration is attempting to change the public understanding of American history by taking actions to rewrite the stories told by public lands and waters. These actions will make it more difficult for all Americans to experience and appreciate American democracy and deprive the people who have been connected to such lands for millennia of representation in our national story. U.S. democracy relies on the education of its difficult and messy history alongside the hopeful and the aspirational. But erasing the darker parts of our shared history muddles the allegory that everyone can participate in our democracy. This erasure is an attempt to undermine the history of America, and in doing so, redefine who America is for. Tomorrow is Cinco de Mayo and the National Day of Awareness for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls. This is a crisis that has gone on for generations, largely ignored, largely invisible, largely erased. We have seen how public places are used to memorialize painful and difficult stories when it is politically convenient for the right. In March 2025, the Trump administration signed an executive order changing the name of Anahuac National Wildlife Refuge to Jocelyn Nungare, named for a young woman who was murdered the previous year. Senator Ted Cruz said at the time, "Jocelyn was murdered by illegal aliens, an unspeakable crime that should have never occurred." He added, "We have a duty to honor her memory and to bear witness alongside her family." And on that point, I agree. We do have a duty to commemorate violence, injustice, and loss, but not selectively, not comfortably, but honestly. Imagine for a moment if we honored every missing or murdered Indigenous woman or girl in the same way. We would likely run out of national parks to rename before we even reach the letter B. That is the scale of this erasure. That is the depth of the silence. The stories we tell matter. Back to you, Olivia.
Thank you for those powerful words, Angelo. Up next, we're going to hear from Amanda Pantoja, Urban Greening Initiative Coordinator at Green Latinos. At the Urban Greening Initiative, Amanda has overseen projects ongoing in Los Angeles, Chicago, and Albuquerque that are beacons of cultural stewardship and environmental restoration. Over to you, Amanda.
Thank you, Olivia. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for being here. As we gather for Cinco de Mayo, I want to remind you all that we're not just reclaiming a moment in history, we're reclaiming the stories that live in our communities. Because every piece of land holds a story, even the spaces we pass by every day. A park a few blocks from your home, the urban garden on a once abandoned lot, and the trees lining your street. These spaces may seem small, but they carry deep living histories. Through Green Latinos urban greening work, we've seen what happens when communities shape their stories of land and environment, real transformation and healing for both people and place. Since launching this initiative, that transformation has already taken root in a variety of very powerful ways, engaging more than 7,600 community members, bringing people together through over 350 events and workshops, and generating over 3,500 volunteer hours dedicated to restoring and reimagining local spaces. In Los Angeles, for example, we planted over 200 trees in neighborhoods where shade was needed most, planting canopy and new stories of care and community rooted in the land. In Chicago, 30 young children took part in hands-on environmental learning, connecting with the land in ways that empower them to carry these experiences forward for the next generation. In Albuquerque, we've distributed over 10,000 pounds of fresh food and 750 plants to local families, supporting neighborhood food production, self-sufficiency, and resilience from the soil up. Without these community-led projects, many of these spaces would have been lost, left to pollution, extraction, or development that erases both history and our cultures. These places may look different, but they are connected by a common thread. Communities stepping in to shape what the land becomes and what story it tells next. So today, we take back Cinco de Mayo to make sure these stories uplift the futures that we deserve, a future where our neighborhoods are cooler, healthier, and more connected in the face of a changing climate, a future where restoring land also restores our well-being, a future where the solutions to climate change are rooted in culture and collective action. Because green spaces, our parks, our gardens, and our tree-lined streets are powerful solutions. They clean our air, they reduce extreme heat, they restore water systems, and they ultimately create spaces for healing, joy, and connection. And we've already seen what's possible when we invest in them. We see our neighbors organizing, planting, restoring, and reimagining what their environment can be. We also see these stories of these spaces not just preserved, they grow. They're like seeds in the soil, rooted in history, nurtured by community, and shaped by care over time. And what we are seeing today is the beginning of a thriving ecosystem, a landscape where past, present, and future are connected, where communities are both the caretakers and the harvest of everything we've sown together. That is what history will remember us for. Thank you.
True that. Thank you so much, Amanda. So I'm glad to take back what I stated earlier. Representative Adelita Grijalva of Arizona's 7th Condistrict has graciously provided a recorded statement to be a part of this online press conference. Really grateful for her and making the time to speak out on these important issues while she is meeting with constituents in Yuma. Congresswoman Adelita Grijalva has been a champion for truth and climate science at our national parks and keeping public lands in our hands so that we may pass them on to the next generation. She has brought together Congress members from as far as Hawaii and New York and beyond on the House floor, as well as in numerous meetings of the House Natural Resources Committee to draw attention to secretarial order whitewashing history and climate science at our national parks. So we have a video to play for her statement. We'll go ahead and share that and let her take the floor. And after that, we'll open up a Q&A.
Hola, buenos dias, and thank you to Green Latinos for bringing us together today. I'm Congresswoman Adelita Grijalva, proudly representing Arizona's 7th Congressional District. I'm sorry I couldn't be there with you today live for this important conversation, but thank you to Green Latinos for this opportunity to speak with you all. On the eve of Cinco de Mayo, we're reminded of the resilience, identity, and power of people to shape their future. That's what's at stake at our national parks. Our public lands are landscapes that tell the story of who we are. And that story is incomplete without Latino, Chicano, and Hispanic voices adding the culture, legends, and histories of our gente, our people, stories of historic sites, deserts, and sacred lands. Today, we're seeing efforts to erase those stories, removing Spanish language resources and creating fear that keeps families from visiting the very lands that belong to them. This should never be okay. Our parks, our national spaces are for everyone. When we limit access to rewrite history, we diminish them. In Southern Arizona, our community knows these lands are cultural and historic anchors for Indigenous and Latino communities. Erasing our connection is an injustice. On Cinco de Mayo, we should expand access, protect language inclusion, and tell the full American story. I'll keep fighting to ensure these parks remain accessible, inclusive, and honest, because our history belongs to us. Muchísimas gracias. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman Grijalva. All right, everybody. So right now it's been made clearer than ever that the imperative to remember the meaning of the historic victory at La Batalla de Puebla, true history and environmental education at our national parks, and safe outdoor access to spaces near and far is a matter of our freedom. Our freedom to grow up in healthier places, to think for ourselves, and to decide how the past will guide us to make a better future. Now we're open for Q&A. Please enter your questions in the Q&A box, or you can ask to go off mute to pose your question live. While you all get thinking on that, I want to pose a question to our panelists, which is, first, can you give some examples of interpretation, be it at a national park or a local park, that you think has benefited the public, and give a picture of what's missing if any of that goes away, whether it's like a Spanish translation or a story that is told? And that's just open for anybody who has a response.
I can try first if that's okay. So, one's kind of a non-traditional one, but Arlington National Cemetery as a park. And last fall, summer, during the erasure waves, I knew who Colin Powell was when they were doing some erasure there, but I did not know who Lieutenant Colonel Hector Santa Anna was. And I saw his name associated with some of that, and I found out that Lieutenant Colonel Hector Santa Anna was a B-17 pilot, a Mexican-American B-17 pilot, one of the few that had, ascended the ranks to even fly. He worked in the mines before then. Just an awesome story. And the perverse outcome of erasure is that it helped me learn. I'm a banned book reader, right? So I'm more curious. I'm looking at this, and it helped me realize like the depth of, what they will do to erase people that have given everything they can for this country, like literally taking the moving the earth to create the products that we have, then turning that into being a pilot during World War II, and then being now. And then the other thing that I was curious about it is, yes, he's the directly related to General Santa Anna, and so from a history standpoint, it just was in looking at Cinco de Mayo, it to me is a super example of how intertwined our histories are as quote unquote America, the United States, Mexico, especially anything that happened with the Alamo. And we hear about, a lot of the white people at the Alamo. But if we look at Tejanos and whatever we considered, Mexican statehood at the time and who actually fought there and gave their lives on both sides, we now see today those same battles being fought and who we're preserving, how we're telling those stories, and how it's our duty to show the lineage and how intertwined those things are. So I'm just grateful, not for the erasure, but for the opportunity to learn about that segment of our history that we really don't get to see a lot about, and those faces that we don't really get to see represented in those, quote unquote heroic terms. So I'm appreciative for that at Arlington.
Thank you. Angela.
I'll give an example of here in Washington, D.C., but I think all of us have this experience of when we were like in the eighth grade and we went somewhere, maybe it was a museum, or maybe it was a national park, and we saw something, an exhibit, and we learned something. And it's like, and we had never thought about something in a particular way. And one of those things that often happens is you see yourself in history. And like when you see yourself in history, you see your place in the American story. And just a quick example of something here in Washington, D.C. If you go down to the African American Civil War Museum, there is an exhibit that talks about the Latinos who served with the African American units in the Civil War. Did you know that Latinos fought in the Civil War of the United States? How does that change your perception of what it means to be an American? So like that's just one example. And the Trump administration has taken this all of government approach to like erase all of these stories from all of our public lands. And I forget, was it the New York Times who had the story a couple weeks ago where somebody, like a brave soul in the government, leaked what it was that they were attempting to erase, and it was in like the hundreds and thousands of exhibits that they're looking to erase. And just one example could for that kid who's on that class trip, they won't have that experience of seeing that thing and learning about themselves and learning about their place in this country.
Thank you. Chazari.
Thank you. Latino Outdoors, we have a volunteer team and regional teams across the state of Texas. And right now we see with the San Antonio Missions National Historic Park, a register of culture and the intersection and policy as well. But most recently, we had a national camp out, I believe 2 years ago now in San Antonio, Texas. In San Antonio, if you've ever visited, it's literally a hub of Latino culture with American influence and these fusions of people from all walks of life. And the city is amazing and feel welcoming, but just not too far from San Antonio is we have Big Bend National Park as well. And right now what we're seeing is the border wall infrastructure by the federal administration taking place. But the impacts it's not going to only have on people and the connection about the Rio Grande and the connection to all of our connections to the land, but also wildlife, our water, our connections to larger issues beyond the people, but internet connected to the people as well. So I really want to highlight the importance of staying vigilant and speaking out, because all of these are interconnected to our communities, whether we live on these larger public lands or these areas that are currently designated, but deeply connected to our communities, our backyards as well. And just wanted to highlight that's one of hundreds, if not thousands, of impacts that are happening across the United States when it comes to erasure of these larger interconnected stories to our communities as well. And so just again, wanted to highlight that and to take action wherever you can, whether that's to call your representative, know who your congressperson is. But again, even those conversations start smaller at home with your city council and your board members, because we understand the impacts it could have on your own personal life, including your communities, to stay active or to speak out, right? We want to make sure that everyone feels safe and feels comfortable. So please engage where and how you can as well.
Gracias, Jazz. Looks like we got a question in the Q&A box. We would love to keep responding to y'all in attendance questions and commentary. So please use the Q&A button to join the conversation. Jennifer Roberts asked, do you know of any examples or information related to Latino, Latina, and Latina history having been removed from national parks that were ultimately returned after protests or local action?
Hasn't been returned to action, but so CAP is doing sort of like a deep analysis of the spreadsheet of things that were removed. And one of the more ridiculous things is the government is spending a lot of money removing all mentions of Gulf of Mexico from the government, like something out of Orwell's 1984. So we have all of these government staffers spending time and resources just looking for places where the Gulf of Mexico is mentioned and then reporting it to their higher ups. I think for the most part, I still say the Gulf of Mexico. I don't call it by the other name. I think most people just laugh at that. I don't think they see it as like a threat to their safety. But that is just one example of how ridiculous this is.
Yeah, there was a report from a staffer of the Gulf Islands National Seashore where they specifically broke down how much it would take to replace the 4 publications, 60 waysides, and 18 exhibits that refer to the Gulf of Mexico. Their current quote that they included their report for replacing all of them is over $42,234. So definitely would be, I think at this point we can only speculate, having not been to Gulf Islands National Seashores, to say if those sites or if those waysides and publications and exhibits are still there or they've been obscured. We've heard some stories of, for example, at Cesar Chavez National Monument, it's possible that there have been curtains put before some exhibits at the National Monument. Um, and so Green Latinos community partners are monitoring sites live to see which of these reports are actually being ending up and having interpretive material removed. But related to Latino history, reports of anything being removed and then ultimately returned, that isn't a story that we've uncovered yet. Thank you for your question, Jennifer.
I just took a quick look at the spreadsheet. They're also deleting like sort of any mentions of colonial times. And a lot of that is Spanish colonialism, especially down south and in the Caribbean. Um, and again, yeah, I don't think people don't even know this is happening yet, which is why we're talking to the media to tell you about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the pieces of interpretation affected at the Salt River Bay National Historic Park and Ecological Preserve at the U.S. Virgin Islands refers to the impacts of Spanish colonialism and first contact between the indigenous people of St. Croix and Spanish explorers. So, very similar story as the interpretation being targeted for removal at San Antonio Missions National Historic Park and San Juan National Historic Site. Very troubling at San Juan National Historic Site is the targeting of books and other publications that teach visitors about Taino lifeways. So very strong connection between indigenous history and Latino history as well that is potentially threatened. So it's not just what we see along the trail sides in national parks, but also the assets that people are able to purchase at the park bookstore, which hurts the bottom dollar of that specific national park unit, since purchases at national park bookstores and gift shops often create revenue that goes directly back into the functional operations of that national park.
I had it's indirectly related, but to me related to safe spaces is the military bases. And so we had a victory where we went from Fort Hood in Texas to Fort Cavazos back to Fort Hood, right? And so how does that work for safe outdoor spaces for kids? Like imagine if you're a kid who witnessed, those signs coming down, the names changed, you're able to learn about a new individual. And this is somewhere you go to school every day, you eat, you live, everything you do with your family is there. And so to reassert the Confederate name, the enslaver name, is something that you drive through and you see every single day as a kid. There's no way that doesn't negatively shape your life the same way it would be at a park, but almost more touches. And so, um, I think so for me as a veteran, it's been sad to see the DoD be like the precursor to what we see playing out on our public lands almost immediately. And when Jazari talked about, the Rio Grande and this time last year with Big Bend, that was the place where the Army deployed right when they changed these names, right? To me, that's a direct correlation to what they did in LA later on by establishing a physical presence, and then the destruction of the land that we're seeing now. So um, maybe that's just too much for me with like own life, but just thinking about every day somebody has to go through that gate, the message that's going to that kid every single day, especially to see it go backwards and reinsert, reopen the wound is almost worse than what it was in the first place.
I felt that. Thank you, Sherman. Thank you so much for your question, Jennifer. I'll leave the floor open for anybody in the audience who would like to drop a question in the Q&A box or press the button to pose your question live or offer commentary. Okay, seeing no questions or hands raised, I'm going to bring us to a close then. Thank you so much, Jazzery, Angelo, Amanda, and Sherman, and Congresswoman Grijalva for your powerful statements. Eder, thank you so much for being our on-point Zoom wizard and facilitating a seamless Zoom webinar. Um, as y'all go on to possibly celebrate Cinco de Mayo in your own communities, I encourage you to talk about La Batalla de Puebla, to talk about safe outdoor spaces for ourselves, our kids, and our families, to participate in ongoing activities near you, sparking cultural and environmental conservation, and to speak out against the whitewashing of history and truth at our national parks and monuments. The Batalla de Puebla, again, reminds us that our environmental and historical battles are worth fighting for no matter the odds. Because the people of the community of Puebla, Mexico knew the landscape, they knew each other, they volunteered, and they called on support internationally. They defeated the French Empire, who by far outnumbered, outgunned, and had better armor than the combatants at La Batalla de Puebla defending Mexico. So it's not a far cry to say that politically, this is the same position that we're in today. But the fact is, we're not the underdog. The majority of people support truth and environmental education at our national parks. And so as long as we keep banding together and giving our time and our passion to creating a world where our kids are able to thrive in national parks, to feel seen, and to be safe as they're enjoying Mother Nature and learning about nationally significant history, that's the kind of future that we're going to make for our kids and generations to come. So thank you all so very much, everybody. Have a good one.